I remember when everyone around me said I'd never make it in tech. I wasn't the typical techie. I didn't have the fancy coding background or the prestigious college degree that everyone expected. I came from a small town where ambition was something you read about in books, not something people around you pursued. When I told my friends and family about my dream of working in tech, they looked at me like I was crazy. They thought I was chasing an unrealistic dream, something that was too far out of reach. "You should be realistic," they'd say. "The tech industry is too competitive. There's no room for someone like you." It wasn't just my family either. Friends, mentors, and even strangers who I looked up to all said the same thing. They told me that tech was a man's world, that there was no space for someone like me, that the odds were stacked against me. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. I knew my passion, my drive, and my hunger to learn could take me further than anyone could imagine. It was hard to hear all the doubts, especially from people who I thought would support me. It felt like a punch to the gut every time someone dismissed my dreams. But at the same time, I started to get angry, not at them, but at the world that told me I couldn't. I felt this fire inside me. If no one else believed in me, I would believe in myself. The more I heard "you can't," the more determined I became to prove everyone wrong. I wasn't going to let anyone define my future. So, I kept my head down and worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I spent countless hours researching, learning, and honing my skills, even when I didn't know if anyone would ever give me a shot. I taught myself to code, picked up every tech book I could find, and dove deep into the world of startups, Silicon Valley, and the tech ecosystem. Every night after work, I studied, practiced, and stayed up late learning things I didn't understand. It was exhausting, but I felt alive. It was as if the more I immersed myself in this world, the clearer my path became. But getting into tech wasn't as easy as just learning the ropes. I thought that once I knew enough, I could just walk into any company and land my dream job. How wrong I was. I faced rejection after rejection. I would apply for positions, internships, and entry-level jobs, and I rarely even heard back. Each rejection felt like another layer of doubt was being added to my heart. They didn't know me. They didn't know how badly I wanted it. They didn't know how much I believed in what I could bring to the table, but still nothing changed. It felt like the doors were closing on me one after another, and each closed door felt heavier than the last. The worst part? Seeing others who didn't work half as hard as I did slide through the cracks, getting opportunities just because they had the right background or connections. I began to question myself. Was I really cut out for this? Was everyone else right? Was I delusional for thinking I could succeed in this tough industry? But then I thought about why I started this journey in the first place. I wasn't doing it for them, I was doing it for me. I didn't care about fitting into their mold. I was carving my own path, and no matter how many times I got rejected, I wasn't going to stop. I knew that all I needed was one shot, one break, and I could prove everyone wrong, and with every rejection, I became more determined. I started to focus less on the rejections and more on the opportunities that were waiting for me. I realized that no one was going to give me what I wanted. I had to take it. So I shifted my mindset. I started reaching out to people on my own, building connections, seeking out those who might take a chance on someone like me. Every no turned into fuel for my fire. I refused to let those doors stay closed forever. I wasn't just knocking anymore, I was finding a way in. The journey wasn't easy, and it never is. Every obstacle seemed like it was there to teach me something. I learned resilience, persistence, and grit in a way I never had before. And when I finally reached the point where I couldn't stand the rejection anymore, I realized something. The rejection was part of the process. It wasn't about getting to the destination. It was about what I was learning along the way. I was being shaped, molded into someone stronger and more capable. And one day, when I was ready, I knew the right opportunity would come. So when I hit rock bottom, when I felt like I couldn't take one more rejection, that's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to wait around for someone else to take a chance on me anymore. I was going to create my own opportunity. I would start my own company. I gathered a group of people who shared my vision, people who believed in me and my ideas. We were a small team, just a handful of us, but we had one thing no one could take from us: passion. We worked out of my apartment, throwing together ideas, coding late into the night, trying to find our niche in a market that seemed to already be saturated. It felt like we were fighting an uphill battle, but I was determined. I had no plan B. This was my plan, and it had to work. The road was bumpy from the start. We faced every obstacle imaginable: limited funds, technical failures, and an overwhelming market that made it difficult to stand out. But we didn't quit. We persevered. Every small success, every tiny milestone felt like a victory because I knew we were heading in the right direction. There were days when it felt like it wasn't enough, but those moments only pushed us harder. We started gaining traction, getting more attention, and soon we had a product we could show to the world. And then came the hardest part, getting people to believe in us, getting investors on board. I had no connections, no network, no history in the tech industry to fall back on. I was just a determined woman with a big dream and a vision, but somehow, against all odds, we secured our first round of investment. It felt like everything had changed in that moment. It wasn't just the money, it was the validation. Someone finally believed in us, in me. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a reality, and that's when I knew this was just the beginning. I had no choice but to take control of my own destiny. I couldn't keep waiting for someone to give me a chance or waiting for the perfect moment. The rejections were piling up, and I knew that no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't going to find the kind of opportunity I needed if I didn't go out and create it myself. So I made the decision if the tech world wouldn't accept me, I would create my own space within it. Starting my own company felt like a massive leap of faith, but I wasn't afraid. In fact, it felt empowering. I remember the day I decided. I was sitting at my desk staring at the countless rejection emails in my inbox, and it hit me. I wasn't going to waste another minute. I reached out to a few people I knew, friends, acquaintances, and even some mentors who had offered advice over the years, and I asked if they'd be interested in helping me build something from the ground up. It wasn't easy at first. I didn't have much money to get things started. There was no lavish funding, no big venture capitalists waiting to throw money at me. But what I did have was passion. I had an unshakable belief in what we could do, and I was determined to make it work. So I pulled together a small group of like-minded individuals, people who shared the same fire and drive. They didn't care that I didn't have a long track record or a college degree from a fancy university. What mattered was that we all believed in this vision. We all believed that we could change the world. We worked out of my small apartment, squeezing around a tiny table, our laptops open, notebooks scattered everywhere, coffee cups piling up. It was far from glamorous, but it didn't matter. The energy was electric. We had this shared sense of purpose, a kind of optimism that made us forget about the doubts and struggles. In those early days, there were no distractions, just a few people, a single idea, and the overwhelming desire to bring it to life. The hardest part was knowing where to start. We had the idea, now we had to turn it into something real. The first few months were full of trial and error. We didn't know if our idea would work in the market, and the technical challenges were even bigger than we had anticipated. It was frustrating. I remember nights where we would be working on a problem, trying to figure out how to make it work, only to realize that we were still far from a solution. But each time we hit a wall, I refused to let it stop us. We kept going, finding new angles, brainstorming ideas, and researching solutions. The only thing I knew for sure was that we couldn't give up. We faced all kinds of setbacks, technical glitches that seemed impossible to fix, funding challenges that made us question how we would survive another month, and the constant pressure of balancing so many roles at once. I was trying to do everything: coding, marketing, managing the team, meeting potential investors, and navigating the business side of things. It was overwhelming, but I had no choice. I had to learn fast and keep moving forward. There were days when I was physically exhausted, mentally drained, and emotionally spent. But I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. This wasn't just about building a company. It was about proving to myself and the world that I could do this, and slowly, it started to pay off. We started getting small wins, early traction with a handful of users who believed in what we were doing, positive feedback that fueled our motivation, and small partnerships that gave us a taste of what was possible. With each success, no matter how small, we built momentum. It was like a snowball effect. Each win made the next one feel more achievable. The more progress we made, the more confident we became. But even as we were gaining traction, I knew that the real challenge was still ahead. We needed money. We needed investors. Without capital, our ideas wouldn't go anywhere. But how could we convince people to invest in us when we had no history, no track record, and no proven success? It felt like we were constantly fighting an uphill battle. But I was determined to make it happen. I started reaching out to anyone I could think of: angel investors, potential partners, people who had experience in the tech industry. I made pitch after pitch, working hard to articulate our vision and why we believed in it so much. At times, it felt like no one was listening. I kept hearing "not interested" or "we'll pass for now." But each rejection didn't discourage me. It only made me more focused. Then one day we got our first bite. A small investor decided to take a chance on us. The relief I felt was overwhelming. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to keep us going and show that someone else believed in what we were building. It was validation in the purest form, and that validation was the spark we needed to push even harder. We used that initial funding to expand the team, hire the people we needed to improve our product, and start putting together a marketing strategy that would get the word out. As we moved forward, things started to get easier, though it never felt easy. We built the product, launched it to a wider audience, and watched it grow little by little. The company began to take on a life of its own, and I began to realize that what we had created wasn't just a business, it was a reflection of everything I had worked for. The sleepless nights, the doubts, the sacrifices, all of it was leading to this moment. Every challenge I faced, every obstacle I overcame was building the foundation for something bigger than I had ever imagined. Looking back, those early days were the hardest, but they were also the most rewarding. They were the moments when I learned the most about myself and what I was capable of. I'd gone from feeling like an outsider, rejected by the very industry I wanted to be a part of, to becoming the founder of something real. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving, and I knew this was just the beginning. We had a long way to go, but the dream was finally becoming a reality. As the company started to grow, it felt like the challenges were only just beginning. The initial excitement of securing funding and launching the product was wearing off, and now the real work had to begin. We had to scale, and scaling meant learning new things I never thought I'd have to deal with. I quickly realized that running a business was so much more than just having a good idea. It was about building a system that could operate on its own, hiring the right people, managing cash flow, and figuring out how to handle the growing pains that inevitably come with success. I remember the first time we had to make our first hire outside of our small founding team. It felt like a huge step. Up until then, we'd been doing everything ourselves. But as we brought in new people, I quickly learned how hard it was to find the right fit. Not everyone who seemed talented on paper had the right mindset or vision for our company. It was a learning curve for me, as I had to step into the role of not just CEO, but also a manager and leader. I had to learn how to identify people who were as passionate about the mission as we were and who could grow with the company. Hiring wasn't the only challenge we faced. We also had to deal with the overwhelming amount of competition in the tech industry. Everyone was working on something that seemed similar to what we were doing, and we had to find a way to stand out. I remember long brainstorming sessions with my team where we questioned what made us unique, what set us apart from all the other startups out there. The more we dug into it, the more we realized that our uniqueness wasn't just in the product, it was in the way we were doing things, the culture we were building, and the values we were instilling in our company. We wanted to create something that wasn't just profitable, but that would truly make an impact. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I felt completely overwhelmed. I would lie awake at night thinking about the financial side of things, how to keep the company profitable, how to manage investor expectations, how to navigate the unpredictability of the market. There were days when the pressure felt like it might crush me. But I knew I had to keep pushing forward. I had to be strong for the team. I had to keep the vision alive, even when everything seemed uncertain. At the same time, I was dealing with my own internal battles. Being the CEO of a growing company came with its own set of insecurities. I wasn't just worried about the future of the company, I was worried about myself. Who was I to be leading this? There were days when I felt like I wasn't equipped to handle all the responsibility. Imposter syndrome crept in regularly, especially when I had to make big decisions. Every new milestone felt like another test of my abilities, and there were times when I wasn't sure I was up to the challenge. But then I would remind myself of the journey I had taken to get to this point. The rejections, the self-doubt, the sacrifices. I had earned my place at the table, and I wasn't going to let fear dictate my future. As the company grew, so did my role. I wasn't just running a small startup anymore. I was managing a team, communicating with investors, making high-level decisions, and constantly working on keeping everything aligned with our original vision. It was a full-time job in every sense of the word, but I loved it. Despite the challenges and stress, there was something deeply fulfilling about seeing our hard work come to fruition. I watched the team come together, each person contributing their unique strengths, and I began to realize that our success wasn't just about me, it was about the collective effort of everyone involved. I didn't build this company alone, we built it together. One of the hardest things about growing a business is learning how to delegate. For the longest time, I felt like I had to do everything myself. I thought that if I didn't have my hands in every aspect of the company, it wouldn't succeed. But I quickly realized that the key to scaling was to trust the people around me. I had to let go of control and empower my team to take ownership of their roles. This was a huge shift for me. It meant giving up some of the decision-making power and learning how to trust the experts I had hired. But the more I trusted them, the more I saw how much they could contribute. I learned that my role as a leader wasn't just about making decisions, it was about empowering others to make decisions and providing them with the resources and support they needed to succeed. As we began to hit our stride, something incredible happened. People started to take notice, our product began to get more attention from potential partners, media outlets, and even competitors. Our customer base grew exponentially. I could see the shift happening in real time. We were no longer just a small startup struggling to stay afloat. We were becoming a legitimate player in the tech industry, and that was a feeling I will never forget. It felt surreal to see our company name mentioned in the same sentences as some of the biggest tech companies out there. It was proof that all the sleepless nights, the endless hours of work, and the sacrifices were paying off. But even with all this success, I knew we had to stay humble. The journey wasn't over, and I was determined not to let the success get to my head. There were still so many challenges ahead. I knew that the market could change at any moment, and the competition was always just one step behind, waiting to swoop in and take the lead. I didn't take our success for granted. I knew we had to keep pushing forward if we wanted to stay on top. In those early days, I had often wondered if I was crazy for thinking I could make it in the tech world. Now, standing at the helm of a $10 million startup, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. It hadn't been easy, and it had required more perseverance than I ever thought I had in me. But I had done it. I had built something real. I had proven to myself and to everyone who ever doubted me that I could succeed, and more importantly, I had created a platform for others to succeed alongside me. That was the most rewarding part of it all. By the time we hit the $10 million mark, I had already learned more than I could ever have imagined about business, leadership, and myself. It wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about the legacy we were building, the impact we were making, and the people whose lives were changing because of what we had created. The early days of struggle and uncertainty felt distant, but they were never far from my mind. I knew where we came from, and that kept me grounded, but the company had grown in ways I hadn't even fully anticipated, and with that growth came a whole new set of challenges. The first major challenge I faced was learning how to keep the company culture intact as we expanded. When we were small, everyone knew each other's names, and the team felt like a tight-knit family. We worked side by side in a cramped space, putting in long hours, brainstorming, collaborating, and constantly pushing each other to be better. But as we started hiring more people, that sense of closeness began to shift. We were still passionate, but now there were different personalities, different work styles, and more layers of management. I was worried that we would lose the soul of the company, the thing that made us unique in the first place. I realized quickly that in order to keep the culture intact, I had to be intentional about it. I couldn't just assume that things would work themselves out. As the CEO, I had to set the tone. I had to be present, making sure that our core values, innovation, collaboration, integrity, weren't just words on a wall, but principles we lived by every day. I made it a point to be involved in company events, to know my team, and to actively engage with employees across all levels. I started holding regular town hall meetings where everyone, from the newest hires to senior leadership, could come together and discuss ideas, ask questions, and talk about what was working and what wasn't. Those meetings became an anchor for the company, a reminder that no matter how much we grew, we were all in this together. As the company grew, so did the expectations. Investors wanted more, partners wanted more, everyone was pushing for bigger and faster results. I'll be honest, there were moments when the pressure felt suffocating. It was hard to keep everyone happy, and the stakes were higher than ever. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. One wrong decision could set us back months or even years of progress. And while I had gained a certain level of confidence, I was constantly reminded that no matter how successful we had become, we were still vulnerable. The market could change overnight, a competitor could innovate faster than we could, we had to stay ahead of the curve at all costs. I started thinking a lot about what success meant. When we first started, it was all about proving myself. I needed to show that I could make it in an industry that had doubted me. But now, success had a different meaning. It wasn't just about the numbers, it wasn't just about getting recognition or being able to say, I did it. It was about the people we were helping, the customers who relied on our product, the employees who believed in our mission, and the communities we were reaching. Our success was bigger than me. It was about building something that could stand the test of time, that could make a real difference in the world. And yet, as the company grew, I had to let go of certain things. I had to relinquish control over some of the day-to-day decisions. I couldn't be involved in every aspect anymore, and that was a difficult transition. I had to learn how to trust my team to make the right decisions without micromanaging every move. I had to empower them to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities. It wasn't easy for me. It's a hard thing to do when you've poured your heart and soul into something, but it was necessary for the company to keep moving forward. I had to accept that I couldn't do it all, and that in itself was one of the hardest lessons I've learned. The next challenge that arose was managing the balance between growth and sustainability. We were in a phase of rapid expansion, and there was always pressure to scale quickly. We were acquiring new customers, getting new investments, and hiring at a faster rate than ever before. But with that growth came the risk of burnout, both for myself and my team. I had to be careful not to overextend ourselves, not to stretch our resources too thin. It wasn't enough to just grow. We had to grow in a way that was sustainable. We had to ensure that our infrastructure, our team, and our culture could support the scale we were aiming for. There were moments when I doubted whether we could sustain this pace. Would we be able to maintain the level of excellence that we had set in the early days? Would our customers continue to love our product as we expanded and iterated? Would we lose the passion that had made us successful in the first place? These were the questions that kept me up at night. But what I realized over time was that it wasn't about being perfect, it was about staying true to our vision even when things were uncertain. We had to trust that the foundation we had built, our values, our mission, and our commitment to excellence would carry us through the challenges. As the company neared its $10 million valuation, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. The journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. There were times when I thought about quitting, when I questioned whether I had made the right choice in stepping into the unknown. But now, looking at the success we had achieved, it was all worth it. We had created something real, something that mattered, something that would continue to grow and evolve long after I was gone. I couldn't have done it without the amazing people I had surrounded myself with. The team was everything. They were the ones who made our success possible. The investors, the partners, the customers, they were all part of this journey. But it was the team that had been with me from the very beginning, who had stood by my side through the tough times, who had made it all happen. I owed so much to them. Now, as we were hitting new heights, I realized that the work wasn't over. We had achieved so much, but there was still so much more to do. The 10 million valuation was just a milestone, not the end goal. And while I was proud of what we had built, I was even more excited about what was to come. The future was limitless, and I wasn't going to stop until we had reached even greater heights.